All right, hi. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the introduction, Hillary. I don't plan to offer any normative advice. I'll be purely descriptive today. But anyway, I haven't been working on advertising for a while. I joined Mount Sinai as an assistant professor because I needed a second job. And it is very close to here. So Mount Sinai, I think we're actually in like the lower right-hand corner of this photograph right now. So Mount Sinai is that tall building there is on 102nd Street. That's our new building. That's the Hess Center. That tall black building behind it is where a lot of the hospital is. And then the tall building to the left is where I work at 98th and Madison. So you guys are basically on the Mount Sinai campus right now. This was only something I discovered at about 3 p.m. today because I worked from home because I thought this conference was going to be at like NYU or something. So I rushed uptown to make it here. So Mount Sinai is an interesting organization. It's got a lot of hair on it. It was founded in 1852. The hospital itself has a little over 1,200 beds now. This is data from the official data from like 6 months ago or so. They see a lot of people, so 500,000 outpatient visits a year. And there's a hospital, and there's also a school of medicine. So I'm actually an employee of the School of Medicine as an assistant professor. This was founded much later in 1968. It's a good medical school. The Mount Sinai Health System. So this is the big news. I don't know if you guys have been following this, but we recently merged with Continuum Health Partners, and we now have the largest nonprofit medical system in New York State. It's about over 3,300 beds that we're going to service per year, and I think this is taking us somewhere close to 3 million visits a year. And there's 7 different campuses. So, and I've heard different numbers quoted. I couldn't find anything canonical, but in sort of the top 5 of the largest health networks in America, nonprofit health networks. So it's a pretty high volume treatment facility. And the reason I ended up here is because that guy on the motorcycle there, that's Eric Schott. That's from his profile in Esquire magazine. So Eric grew up about 20 minutes from where I grew up in Michigan and had a similar path. And we met 5 or 6 years ago. And so when he was getting started, he just got a lot of money to start something called the Icahn Institute at Mount Sinai. And the Icahn Institute is attempting to bring the methods of scalable data analysis into medicine. And Eric himself has been working in medicine for a long time. The guy next to him is Andrew Kazarskas, the co-director of the Icahn Institute. So these guys run both the Icahn Institute, which is an institute which spans multiple departments at Mount Sinai, as well as the Department of Genetics and Genomic Sciences. So those are my official appointments. And we have over 100 people in the institute, I guess, and over 400 people in the Department of Genetics. There are a few other West Coast transplants. So the guy with the really good picture is Joel Dudley. He was a PhD student at Stanford, and he's now an assistant professor, a peer of mine here at Sinai. Rong Chen is the fellow in the upper box. He was also at Stanford, and then Michael Linderman is below him. So there's been sort of an exodus of computational talent from the West Coast to the East Coast to try and the thing that's attracting them is the data set that's being assimilated because of the high volume of treatment at Mount Sinai. So I tend to see the world as a set of data-generating entities and a variety of sinks which are collecting data from those entities and attempting to make sense of the behavior and interactions of those entities. So when I walked into Mount Sinai for the first time, I immediately started asking people where the data comes from. The things that I learned. Well, one, Mount Sinai spent a tremendous amount of money, over $100 million, on building out a modern electronic healthcare record. And they did a good job. So you can see that in 2012, they won this nice award from HIMSS, which establishes the fact that they've got a very high-quality electronic medical record that's present. And the thing that's interesting about the electronic medical record is that it doesn't just have sort of structured information about the patient visit. It also contains unstructured information, the clinical notes that the doctors are recording during treatment. So this is a very rich source of information about what's happening clinically at all those different hospitals. And we're undergoing a very large project to integrate the electronic healthcare record that is in use at Mount Sinai with the electronic healthcare records used at the hospitals and the Continuum healthcare facilities. So that's a very interesting data set. That's what I tend to think of as sort of the operational database of the hospital. There are some interesting logging or telemetry data sets as well. So this is one system that we have. It's called Bedmaster. So it's generating a time series of physiological measurements about all the different people who are in those 3,300 plus beds that I mentioned. And like most good data infrastructures, they're only storing the last 3 months, and they're throwing everything away. So I got very excited. So we're having a meeting soon to talk about how to capture this and archive it forever and start doing interesting work with it, because it's also used primarily for alerting, not for data analysis. Given that I am appointed in the Department of Genetics and Genomic Sciences, I should probably be familiar with our Genomics Core facility. So this is one of the more high throughput core facilities in New York. We have quite a few different ways to extract data from DNA and other elements that we find inside your cell. So this Genomics Core facility is pumping out data all day, every day that we're then trying to analyze and integrate with those clinical data sets and those physiological telemetry data sets. So we have a core facility, but we also have an imaging core. I couldn't find a nice overview slide, so you get to take a look at the guy who runs it, Zahi Fayed. So the imaging core facility is actually that building that I talked about on 102nd. It's right in the basement down there. So we're very close to where like tremendous amounts of magnets are being used to see inside people. So they've been spending a lot of money on buying very expensive measurement devices, and they tend to spin off quite a bit of data that can be used to integrate with those clinical and genomics data sets. Oh, shoot. Did I send you an earlier version of this slide deck? We have one more that I wanted to talk about. Let's see where it is. I put it in the wrong section. All right, I'm calling that a repository, not a source of data. So this is my first time presenting these slides. I finished them about an hour ago. So those are the things which generate data in Mount Sinai, and obviously there are many, 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 many more. I was trying to choose some of the highlights, but one of the most important things I left out is, of course, we have billing systems which collect data about what people are actually getting charged for. And one of the things that you learn very early in working with medical data is that if you want high quality data, go to the billing system, don't go to the care provider system. The billing system is really the kind of the source of record of what's happening in the hospital. When I arrived at Mount Sinai, they already had a very well-constructed Mount Sinai data warehouse. It's MSDW. So the Mount Sinai data warehouse, very difficult to read. But basically, it's just recapitulating some of those data sources that I talked about earlier, primarily the non-genomics, non-imaging ones. So these are all the different operational databases that are being used to operate the hospital are having data extracted from them and placed into the data warehouse on a nightly basis, just like it would be anywhere you've seen a data warehouse. This is a graph of the fact count by year, and so this is not cumulative. Those bars represent new facts generated that year. So you can see that in 2012, we generated over 300 million facts. And for those of you who don't do data warehousing, a fact is, you can just think of that as an event which occurred. So that's a row in a database, basically. And so actually, the data model of our Mount Sinai data warehouse is a single big fact table and many different dimension tables used to query it. So you can see that the rate of data generation is increasing, and once you add in the merger with Continuum, this is going to more than triple. So they generate a pretty good amount of data already, and I would say that they're actually only scratching the surface on what we could collect about what's happening around the hospital. So here's some statistics. I pulled this off of an internal website, so hopefully no one from Mount Sinai is here, because I might get fired for showing you guys this. But I'm hopeful that our communities are separate enough that I can get away with this. I think Ali told me he was going to be here. But in any case, so there are 2 million patients inside of that Mount Sinai data warehouse, and there are over 15 million visits, and there are over 36 million diagnoses coded for those visits. And you can see over 175 million test results. So these numbers are fairly small for a consumer internet thing, but the interesting thing about people is they have trillions of cells inside of them that can be measured. So if you multiply 2 million by tens of trillions, you start to get some big numbers. And those cells themselves are turning over. So I tend to think of sort of the page view of the medical domain as like the cell. So I think that there's quite a bit more data that we're going to be able to generate. So for the data warehouse geeks in the audience, As I mentioned, we use a Kimball model, single fact table, 19 different dimension tables. We started capturing data in 2003, so we've got over a decade of data in the system. And actually, just yesterday, I was generating sort of anomaly detections for some time series that actually require data going all the way back. So it's quite nice. I'm used to kind of building these things from scratch, so it's amazing to have this data already there. They have 18 major data sources. The total number of facts is over 1.6 billion, so that one fact table has over 1.6 billion entries in it. The primary use of the data warehouse is actually something they call the cohort query tool. So people actually use it primarily to generate subsets of patients that they can then reach out to and perform a more in-depth study. They don't use it as much they use it for quality dashboards as well, but not as much for sort of hardcore data mining as you would expect. And in particular, the clinical notes are currently really not being leveraged for much mining. So Mount Sinai Data Warehouse is a key storage and computational resource for us at Sinai. Another key storage and computational resource is a traditional high-performance computing supercomputer called Minerva. So Minerva is actually in the basement of that building at 98th and Madison, where I work. This is a pretty cool sci-fi photo. Can I get back? Oh, I guess I can't. But in any case, so Minerva is a pretty big cluster. It's built out of 120 Dell boxes. And those Dell boxes are connected with a high-speed interconnect, InfiniBand, as you might expect, and it's connected to a distributed file system. I believe it's GPFS, running on Data Direct Networks hardware, and we use Torque as our grid scheduler. So if you've ever worked on any sort of high-performance computing cluster, this is going to be quite familiar to you. What's shocking to me is how heavily used this thing is. It's pretty great. So there are 339 users, both inside of and outside of Mount Sinai. We have about 60 users that are collaborating with our scientists that do work on this cluster. Over 160 actual projects, and you can see that over a petabyte of data is actually being stored on that distributed file system. So this is and this only went in April of last year. So this is barely over a year of consumption. So there's a lot of people who want to do scalable data analysis at Mount Sinai. It's very exciting. Another core resource that we have is the Biobank. So again, I couldn't find a nice overview slide. So that's Erwin, the guy who runs the Biobank at the Institute for Personalized Medicine. And this is a very unique resource also. So starting in 2007, Mount Sinai started enrolling patients into we basically take a tissue sample and then genotype that tissue sample. And so we would generate a set of mutations present in that patient. And we now have over 25,000 patients enrolled. And the unique feature of this also is that these patients are consented to be followed up for further research. So one of the very unfortunate things about working in medicine is that when you obtain data from individuals, it is often under a consent form which says you are only able to analyze data for the purpose of this research project, and you are not allowed to contact the person. So even if you find something interesting in that data, you're a researcher working with their data. You're not a physician treating them. So you're not actually allowed to follow up and say, look what I found. So the Biobank is a unique resource which allows us to analyze the data for a variety of purposes, and if we find something interesting, we can actually go and enroll the patient themselves in more of a prospective controlled study. So this is a very exciting resource to have at Mount Sinai. And so another data resource that we've built is a database right now called Krakatoa, and this picture has nothing to do with it other than this is an FTP visualization system that we've built at Cloudera, which allows us to basically see all of the different open data repositories that are out there. And so you can see how big is the data available on this FTP server, and you can drill down and then pull down the data that you want. So Rong Chen, the gentleman from Stanford that I showed a picture of earlier, has a wonderful collection of Perl scripts that he uses to extract data from a wide variety of open data repositories with biomedical data sets in them, and he collects all of that data into a MySQL database. He creates schemas for it, standardizes it, and makes it available to other researchers. So we have collections of data, both of data that is generated inside of the hospital, as well as open data sets that are available to everyone to do biomedical research. So a lot of times you have to sort of compare and contrast what we're seeing inside of the hospital with what is happening in the rest of the world. So those are the data repositories that we work with. What are some of the interesting data products that we build? Well, one of the interesting things that we've done is we've built this thing called PACT. PACT is, many of you may know that with the Affordable Care Act, hospitals are now going to be reimbursed based on certain performance metrics. One of those performance metrics, maybe the most important, is the 90-day readmission rate. So if you come to the hospital, we treat you, you shouldn't be coming back within 90 days. We should have fixed whatever was wrong, and we shouldn't see you again. So you're going to get rewarded if your predicted 90-day, your expected 90-day readmissions rate is higher than your actual 90-day readmissions rate. So if you're doing a better job than expected, you're going to get to keep the thing that you've done better. And so PACT is a program that's very interesting at Mount Sinai, where they extract data from the clinical data, from the Epic EHR, and they build a predictive model of whether or not you're going to come back within 90 days. And they actually feed that back into the EHR system. So Epic has a field which is generated by this predictive model, which says likelihood of readmission, and it gets generated upon time of discharge. And so there's actually a tiered system of how much we're going to reach out to you and help you based on our prediction of whether or not you're going to be readmitted in 90 days. So if you have a high readmission risk, you're going to have this 5-week post-discharge care coordination. So we have a care team which is following a standard protocol to help you to ensure that you're not back in here in less than 90 days. So this is a really interesting use of predictive modeling to improve healthcare quality. Another very interesting use of predictive modeling to improve healthcare quality is something called CLIPMERGE PGX. So CLIPMERGE is built on top of the EHR system, which is the Epic system, and it's built on top of the Biobank. So for the people who have been genotyped, we pull data out of the clinical record, and we combine that with their genotype information, and then we combine that with studies which have been shown, which have been done outside of Mount Sinai, which have demonstrated that certain mutations present in the individual's DNA indicates a different response to a certain kind of drug. And so that's what's known as a pharmacogenomic, abbreviated PGX finding. And so we have a database of all pharmacogenomics findings, and we combine the clinical records of the individual with their genomic profile, and then we compare that against this database of understood pharmacogenetic interaction factors, and we will actually generate a score which goes back into the electronic healthcare record. So this is the thing that the physician sees, and so the physician will actually be told, hey, if you're giving the person this drug, you need to follow an altered dose regimen because this person has this particular mutation present. So these are two things which are already being done at Mount Sinai. In this particular pattern of basically sitting a database outside of the operational databases, collecting data from multiple different data sources, building a predictive model, and then feeding back into the operational systems is quite familiar from a wide variety of disciplines, and it's nice to see that this path has already been sort of trodden a bit at Mount Sinai. So I have a lab now. I have been authorized to hire, I got a budget, I think I can get between 7 and 10 people, and I'm building out a cluster of about 200 servers. So this is my nascent data management infrastructure at Mount Sinai. So we've been benchmarking 14 servers to arrive at the optimal hardware profile, and hopefully we're going to be issuing a purchase order for about 100 more servers this week. And this is actually in the basement of the building on 102nd Street. So we'll be running Cloudera software. So why do I need 2 jobs? Well, basically at Cloudera I build tools, but to build better tools you have to use the tools that you're building. So my goal here is to install my software, pump a bunch of data from around the hospital into it, and use my software to improve healthcare outcomes. Seems like everybody wins in that case. So this is it. This is the beginnings of that cluster. We've already started putting a few interesting data sets from around the hospital in there and querying things, and it's going to get a lot bigger very soon. So one of the primary functions of the lab is going to be operating this cluster and making it a shared resource for everyone in the hospital, in the same way that Minerva and the Mount Sinai Data Warehouse can be used by any researcher inside of Mount Sinai. So that's one thing that we're going to do, but we're also going to be attempting to do our own research. And so this research is going to be in 2 different domains. One is on the tool building side. So At Cloudera, the tools that we build, we tend to have to think only about 2 or 3 years out because that's our product life cycle. So this is a way in which I can think sort of 5 to 10 years out. And sort of my core thesis in terms of the tools that I use to do data science is that we've had this Cambrian explosion in data infrastructures over the last 10 to 15 years, and that's sort of winding its way down. And I believe we're going to have a similar explosion in interfaces to that data. And when I say interfaces, I don't mean graphical interfaces. I mean interfaces that programmers use. So if you've ever used something like LINQ, language embedded queries, then you understand how you can extend the syntax of a programming language to better support the operations of a data scientist. And there are examples of this everywhere. There's R's formula syntax. There's languages like SQL and MDX. So my plan is to basically sit inside of this biomedical domain and attempt to write libraries to perform common scientific operations and allow the scientists to do them faster. And I also want to extend the languages that I work within, do embedded DSLs. And in fact, I've grown a beard simply because you can't write a programming language without a beard. It's been empirically proven. So I've told my wife, look, this is temporary. I'm writing a programming language. Once I finish, I'll shave. So that's a key focus, and I do think that because we're in the medical domain, and I see I got a red light, so I'll wrap up very quickly. Because we're in the medical domain, the goal for me is I want to work on projects that can only be done at Mount Sinai, so could only be done inside of a care provider facility, and I want to work on projects which are going to change how a physician treats a patient. I triage away everything else, and so if you're going to build software that changes how a physician treats a patient, it better be correct. And so I think that there's a very important role to be played by statically typed functional languages in care delivery. So we've been kind of pursuing, working with OCaml and Haskell to deliver some of these libraries. So if that's of interest to you, I'd love to talk to you after the session. And I also plan to use these tools myself. So the goals of developing novel therapeutics or diagnostics, integrating genomics to the clinic, and improving outcomes and reducing costs in the hospital. So I'll talk about 2 projects very quickly, one of which is predicting infection risk. So hospital-acquired infections, if you're over 65, you're more likely to die from a hospital-acquired infection than almost anything else other than heart attack, stroke, car accident. It's the number 6 cause of death for people over that age. So it's an incredibly important problem to work on, and we've been doing some predictive modeling of who's at risk for a hospital-acquired infection inside of Sinai. And the second thing that's very, very interesting that I'm only just now learning about is personalized cancer treatment. So many of you have likely read that cancer is now being thought of not as tens or dozens of diseases, but rather thousands. And each individual's cancer has a different genomic and gene expression profile. And so we can profile cancer patients inside of Mount Sinai, compare their tumors to tumors that have been seen in the wild and to the germline of the patient themselves, and see if we have any evidence that existing medicines may be able to impact this patient's cancer. And so generate a potential treatment for that patient as well as a potential clinical trial for patients like that patient. So those are 2 example projects that we're working on to actually do science. And I'd love to host people. We're a block away. I'm building a lab. I've hired 1 person. I've got 7 more to hire. So if these problems sound interesting, I'd love to work with you. Thank you.